We continue our videos about the Scrum. In this video we will talk about the Scrum artifacts and derivatives of these artifacts. What does it mean, how we can use these artifacts in practice, and other interesting topics about the Scrum artifacts. Just want you to remind that our video consists of different sections with required topics. Each section is a separate video. In the description of this video, you may find topics. Kindly ask you to subscribe to our channel and send us your likes. It's really important to promote this video. So, let's start. Scrum artifacts represent work or value to provide transparency and opportunities for inspection and adaptation. Artifacts defined by Scrum are specifically designed to maximize transparency of key information so that everybody has the same understanding of the artifact. According to the Scrum Guide, each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus against which progress can be measured. For the product backlog, it is the product goal. For the sprint backlog, it is the sprint goal. And for the increment, it is the definition of done. Let's talk about the product backlog. As described in the Scrum Guide, the product backlog is an ordered list of everything that is known to be needed in the product. It is the single source of requirements for any changes to be made to the product. The product owner is responsible for the product backlog, including its content, availability, and ordering. A product backlog is never complete. The earliest development of it lays out the initially known and best understood requirements. The product backlog evolves as the product and the environment in which it will be used evolves. The product backlog is dynamic. It constantly changes to identify what the product needs to be appropriate, competitive, and useful. If a product exists, its product backlog also exists. The product backlog is composed of backlog items, which refer to as PBIs, product backlog items, backlog items, or simply items. Most PBIs are featured items of functionality that will have a tangible value to the user or customer. These are often written as user stories, although Scrum does not specify the format of PBIs. Other PBIs includes defects needing repair, technical improvements, knowledge acquisition work, and any other work the product owner deems valuable. The product backlog has four qualities. It's detailed appropriately, estimated, emergent, and prioritized. Let's look at these qualities in more detail. The first is detailed appropriately. The product backlog items are detailed appropriately. Higher priority items are described in more detail than lower priority ones. Following this guideline keeps the backlog concise and ensures that the items likely to be implemented in the next sprint are workable. As a consequence, requirements are discovered, decomposed, and refined throughout the entire project. Next is estimated. Each product backlog item has a size estimate corresponding to the effort required to develop the item. The product owner uses these estimates as one of several inputs to help determine a product backlog item's priority and therefore position in the product backlog. Also, a high priority large product backlog items near the top of the backlog signals to the product owner that additional refinement of that item is necessary before it can be moved into a near-term sprint. Then emergent. As long as there is a product being developed or maintained, the product backlog is never complete or frozen. Instead, it is continuously updated based on a stream of economically valuable information that is constantly arriving. For example, customers might change their minds about what they want. Competitors might make bold, unpredictable moves, or unforeseen technical problems might arise. The product backlog is designed to adapt to these occurrences. The structure of the product backlog is therefore constantly emerging over time. As new items are added or existing items are refined, the product owner must rebalance and reprioritize the product backlog, taking the new information into account. And the last, prioritized. All items in the product backlog are prioritized. The most important and highest priority items are implemented first. They can be found at the top of the product backlog. Once an item is done, it is removed from the product backlog. With the latest update of the Scrum Guide, 3 commitments were added to the artifacts. One of these is product goal. The product goal is a commitment to ensure transparency and focus against progress. According to the Scrum Guide, the product goal describes a future state of the product which can serve as a target for the Scrum team to plan against. The product goal is in the product backlog. The rest of the product backlog emerges to define what will fulfill the product goal. The product goal is in a way the sum of all the team's sprint goals. It is the state that the product backlog describes. It is where the Scrum team is trying to get to. Any product or service or process or release or whatever needs to have a goal that is likely many sprints into the future. For example, when anybody sits down to write a book, he or she has a goal, a finished book that says what he or she wants to say in the way he or she wants to say and into the hands of a reader. That takes time. It usually takes a year to 18 months, usually. Now that goal is a big one and he or she has to keep it in mind. But he or she also has to ask the question, what am I going to do next sprint to get closer to that goal? And then, even more importantly, how do I measure if what I'm doing is getting me closer to my product goal, a finished book? In product management, the product goal helps achieve product vision and business objectives. The goal should relate to the broader product strategy. It should also be easy to understand, actionable, achievable, and measurable. Aligning the product goal with product vision is just the first step. As a product owner, you must also align and roll product goals up to the overall business goals. This demonstrates how the product delivery will enhance the success of the business. It also shows product stakeholders how their unique work matters. You rely on many teams for a product release, from sales and support to engineering and development. Product goal lets each team know how their work contributes at a high level. The understanding of how the Scrum team will achieve the product goal is described in the product backlog. The activity that the Scrum team needs to deliver, the plan on how the team forecasts they will achieve the goal is communicated in the product backlog. The product owner is accountable for the development and communication of the product goal. However, the product owner would work with the Scrum team and stakeholders to make sure that it's clear and easy to understand. There is no single definitive way to do this. It depends on your context and domain. The product goal is a strategic vision and the frequency of updates will reflect your situation and context. If the market and product are fairly stable, it may be every quarter. If the situation is rapidly changing, then more frequently. The product goal should be a singular goal that each sprint goal can be crafted towards. It should be short, measurable, and easy to understand. Everyone on the Scrum team and the wider organization should understand it and how the work that they are doing contributes to it. Refinement of the product backlog is an ongoing activity during a sprint in which developers and the product owner look at the product backlog currently ordered for one of the next sprints. There is a growing certainty that the items are actually going to be implemented as the timing gets closer. As items come closer in time, teams might want to unveil dependencies, understand better what is expected from the work, decide on a shared approach for its development, or help a product owner understand the development impact at a functional level. Collaborative refinement of product backlog and the additional knowledge that emerges from the refinement conversation increases the chances that the work might actually or more easily be pulled into a sprint when it is presented at sprint planning. Product backlog refinement is not an official time-box Scrum event. Product backlog refinement is an activity that many teams undertake to smoothen their sprints and limit turbulence in the first days of sprint. Product backlog refinement is a great activity within a sprint, a good tactic to collaboratively manage product backlog. Some can do without, however. Discovering and describing product backlog items is an ongoing process. If you are used to creating comprehensive and detailed requirement specification upfront, recognize that Scrum encourages a fundamentally different approach. Requirements are no longer frozen early on, but instead are discovered and detailed throughout the entire project. As our understanding of customer needs and how they can best be met improve, existing requirements are likely to change or become redundant, and new requirements will emerge. Product discovery is therefore not limited to the early development stage, but covers the entire project in Scrum. Many product managers transitioning into the product owner role find it challenging not to write down all requirements and not to detail them straight away, even if they could. Prioritization is a part of product backlog refinement, and it directs the team work by focusing the team on the most important items. It also freezes the product backlog contents progressively. Now we will talk about the sprint backlog. As described in the Scrum Guide, the sprint backlog is composed of the sprint goal, the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, as well as an actionable plan for delivering the increment. The sprint backlog is a forecast by developers about what functionality will be in the next increment and the work needed to deliver the functionality into a done increment. The sprint backlog makes visible all the work that developers identify as necessary to meet the commitment of the sprint backlog, the sprint goal. The sprint backlog is a plan with enough detail that changes in progress can be understood in the daily Scrum. Developers modify the sprint backlog throughout the sprint. Only developers can change the sprint backlog during a sprint. The sprint backlog is highly visible, real-time picture of the work that developers plans to accomplish during the sprint, and it belongs solely to developers. The sprint backlog increases the transparency of information about what work planned and performed during the sprint. It is a highly visible real-time picture of the work that developers plan to accomplish during the sprint. The sprint backlog is maintained from the sprint planning until the sprint review. Although it starts with some detail, the sprint backlog emerges during the sprint as developers learn more about their work and modifies the sprint backlog accordingly. Only developers can change the sprint backlog. As work is performed or completed, developers update the estimated remaining work. What happens if the team finds surprises about the work during the sprint? Developers work through the plan and learns more about the work needed to achieve the sprint goal. Developers may find that they under or overestimated a product backlog item. It is absolutely normal. As new work is required, developers add it to the sprint backlog. When elements of the plan are deemed unnecessary, they are removed. Developers modify the sprint backlog throughout the sprint, and the sprint backlog emerges during the sprint. So let's summarize all about the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is forecast by developers about what functionality will be in the next increment and the work needed to deliver that functionality. The sprint backlog is a plan with enough detail that changes of progress can be understood in the daily Scrum. Developers modify the sprint backlog throughout the sprint, and the sprint backlog emerge during the sprint. As a new work is required, developers add it to the sprint backlog. As work is performed or completed, the estimated remaining work is updated. When we create the sprint backlog, there is an expectation that work will emerge during the sprint. The scope may need to be renegotiated. The sprint goal helps to provide focus on an objective we want to achieve and allow the flexibility to negotiate the work to achieve that objective. The sprint goal is created during the sprint planning meeting by the entire Scrum team. The sprint goal gives to developers some flexibility regarding the functionality implemented within the sprint. The selected product backlog items deliver one coherent function, which can be the sprint goal. The sprint goal can be any other coherent that causes developers to work together rather than on separate initiatives. Creating a clear sprint goal can be challenging for Scrum teams. Follow these 4 rules when you and your team are creating and following the sprint goal during the sprint. The sprint goal shouldn't be big. The sprint goal shouldn't be vague. Pay attention to the sprint goal during the sprint. The sprint goal should be felt meaningful. When the sprint goal becomes obsolete, the sprint is automatically cancelled. There are various reasons for the sprint goal to become invalid, such as market changes, organizational changes, and many others. In summary, a good sprint goal can help a team focus and have the flexibility to create a done increment by the end of a sprint. A good sprint goal helps a team to understand the purpose and impact of the work they are doing, which is a driver for intrinsic motivation. As we know from the Scrum Guide, an increment is a concrete stepping stone toward the product goal. Each increment is additive to all prior increments and thoroughly verified, ensuring that all increments work together. In order to provide value, the increment must be usable. At the end of a sprint, the new increment must be done, which means it must be in usable condition and meet the Scrum team's definition of done. The moment a product backlog item meets the definition of done, an increment is born. An increment is a body of inspectable done work that supports empiricism at the end of the sprint. The increment is a step toward a vision or goal. The increment must be in a usable condition, regardless of whether the product owner decides to release it. When should the product increment be released to the market? By the end of each sprint, the product increments is ready for shipping. We must understand the difference between potentially shippable and potentially releasable. By the end of the sprint, the product is ready to be shipped. That doesn't mean we can release the product in the market. The release of the product increment depends upon many factors. When can we say that the product increment can be released to the market? From a technical point of view, or as a Scrum team, we should ensure that the product increment will tested or of high quality and is complete. Why are these criteria important? Imagine you are using a banking app and suddenly your account is debited with some big amount. How would be your experience as a user? To avoid such a bad experience, it is very important that the product is tested. Not just testing, we should also ensure that all the critical and high severity bugs are resolved and the product is of high quality and not many known issues are present in the product. Also, before releasing the product increment, we should also see the product increment is complete from the end user point of view. That means a particular piece of functionality which customer considers mandate is completely working. In short, the functionality has to pass through the definition of done. We will talk about definition of done in the next part of this course. In summary, developers at the end of each sprint deliver potential shippable product increment, which is complete, tested, and of quality. With each sprint, the product increment goes on increasing in terms of functionality. This product increment is ready to use, and it depends upon a customer whether to release it in the market immediately or not, depending upon the finances. According to the Scrum Guide, each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus against which progress can be measured, and for the increment, it is the definition of done. The definition of done is like a checklist of the types of work that the team is expected to successfully complete it before it can declare its work to be potentially shippable. If the definition of done for an increment is part of the standards of the organization, all Scrum teams must follow it as a minimum. If it is not an organizational standard, the Scrum team must create a definition of done appropriately for the product. In a definition of done, the conditions are expressed that need to be met by an increment of product in order for it to be shippable. It is an overview of all the activities, criteria, tasks, and work that need to have been performed on a working piece of software in order to be able to release it into production. The definition of done is essential to fully understand the work needed to create a releasable increment and for the inspection of that increment at the sprint review. The definition of done serves the transparency required in Scrum in terms of the work to be done and the work actually done. The empiricism of Scrum only functions well with transparency. Transparency requires common standards to work against and to inspect upon. The definition of done sets the standard for releasable and should be known by all players. Transparency means not only visible but also understandable. The content of the definition of done should be self-explanatory. Through the definition of done, quality is at the heart of what Scrum teams do. No undone work is part of the increment. No undone work is put into production. Ever, from the inspection of the increment based upon the definition of done at the sprint review, the collaborative conversation might include quality and requirements with regards to the definition of quality in the organization. This helps the team consider the definition of done at the subsequent sprint retrospective. Primary ownership of the definition of done lies with the entire Scrum team. Developers do all the hard work related to delivering working software that complies with the definition of done. A definition of done can be forced upon developers. Neither can it be cut short by force outside the Scrum team. Developers will include their own development standards and will obviously incorporate the functional or business quality expectations from the product owner. Developers will also include general organizational expectations and compliance from the development, engineering, quality, or operation areas. The definition of done stresses the importance of seizing the opportunity to ship by doing all of the work required to capitalize on an opportunity within a sprint. So, we have completed the fourth section of our video course, and before you will switch to the next part of this video, we recommend you to take our exam simulator. The link for free and pay version is below in description. Also, there will be a special discount for you. We are still waiting for your likes and subscriptions. If you have any question, feel free to contact us. Feel free to ask your question in comments below. We will be glad to provide the answer as soon as it's possible.